Don't you think it's about time for a podcast that's more fulfilling? One that's about the vibrant exchange of ideas and perspectives that happens when we actually come together. We got you covered. Welcome to the Deep Blue Project, where the depths of conversation meet the waves of personal experience. This is a real, raw, and unscripted show about everything from leadership lessons to self-awareness, wellness, and the latest current events. We cover it all. We have a rotating cast of guests as we share our personal stories, insights, and opinions on the issues that matter most. Plus, we have a blast while doing it. The Deep Blue Project. It's not just a podcast, it's an experience. And now your host, Chris Workman.
Right, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Deep Blue Podcast. I am your host, Chris Workman, and I'm here today with a very special guest for Season 1, Episode 2. I have the famous, as far as I'm concerned, Michael Laidler. He is a professional speaker. He's a best-selling author and a police officer, even though he's a former police officer, but has that in respect. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Chris, man, for your second one, I'm excited. I know you had Matt Davis on the first one. So, folks, if you haven't heard the one, go back to his as well. But anytime I get on a podcast, especially with fellow law enforcement officers, it's always a feeling that it's just satisfying because it's always good to be able to talk to people that have a similar background to you, especially in the career field that we have all been in.
Right. So why don't you give for our audience? I mean, I guess you've done many podcasts. I've listened to quite a few, and I've also seen you speak and had that opportunity. Audience, just a little bit about yourself and how you got into what you're doing now.
So I'm going to keep it short as I can because I don't want to lose any of the audience members. I don't want them to say, you know what, I need to get a cup of coffee or some tea. So I'm going to try to keep it as minimum as I can. For me, I grew up in Miami, Florida to a single mother. And we struggled. We struggled financially. We struggled finding places to stay. And ultimately, it led me to realizing that we all start somewhere. Even where we start doesn't mean that's where we have to finish. Over time, I was fortunate enough, especially in my adult years, to take some of those experiences and develop a business, which I do now for professional speaking. And a lot of that came from just not my personal style of what was going on, but starting off as a police officer at the age of 19, getting into Border Patrol around the age of 23, getting to federal corrections around 28. And trust me, I didn't get fired from any of these places. It was just life circumstances that led me to one or another because people are going to hear this and say, how many times did you get fired? No, my life dictated why I had to go to other places. All the agencies I've ever worked for, I have loved, I have enjoyed. They all have their pros and cons. It's just where life took me. And then back around 2015, I received a promotion to an official leadership role. Up to that point, and I want to say I was about 30, 31 when I got this promotion, I wasn't really big into public speaking or speaking in front of groups of people. Even in college, I chose to take an interviewing class versus a public speaking course because I knew in that interviewing class, I would talk to one person. Most of my life, I wasn't really that person that wanted to be on a stage or that wanted to present. But during that time of 2015, when I got promoted, I knew that now I was in a role where being the primary communicator in front of other people was required. And I took that opportunity to find an organization called Toastmasters, which is an international organization. If you type it on your computer right now, or your phone, whatever, you can go to toastmasters.org, and there's a little tab on it that says find a club. You put your zip code in there, and I can almost say with confidence that you're going to find something that's within 10 to 15 miles of your house. I recommend, if you haven't done anything like Toastmasters, they're only like $60 every 6 months. Go and develop yourself. But needless to say, that's what I did early on. And from 2016, I started to work on that level of speaking and communicating and leading with a group of people that all wanted to do it with me, which was really cool. Then in 2017, I was presented the opportunity to join the John Maxwell team, which is an organization designed for building coaches, trainers, and speakers. And during that time, they motivated me and inspired me to start my business, which you guys have heard or not heard, or have not heard before, called Michael Laidler Unlimited. And I started that off as primarily being focused on leadership development. And I will say, in all transparency, that when I first formed it, I thought I was going to be able to bring training to law enforcement. But at the time, I was shot down by a supervisor, said, nah, well, we'll get to it at some point. We'll see what happens. So I kind of took that as like, you know what? My current organization didn't want that. Forget it. I'll take it to somebody else. And I did. I took it out to the public, to the private sector, and I did all right. I received a lot of experience and knowledge, but it still wasn't like suiting everything because, you know, whatever industry that you're in, you try to stay within it because those are the people you're closest to. And at that point, I was 15, 16 years within law enforcement. I moved from where I was currently at the time, and then I moved to another state, and I kind of stopped all my business practices just because of timing and, you know, workload. In 2021, I was sitting in my living room, and I was like, man, there's a lot of stuff going on in law enforcement, and I am doing really nothing from the public speaking side to really help it. And I started looking at my situation as far as like self-awareness, leadership, mental wellness. And I was like, you know what? If I need help in this area, I'm sure my brothers and sisters in law enforcement at any organization need it too. And I didn't really know how to do that part. So I found an organization called the Speaker Lab that taught me about marketing. And that was in October of 2021. Since that time, through speaking engagements alone, I have averaged anywhere from 15 to 20 a year, primarily in the law enforcement industry. I would say at least 75% of my clients. And that's what, when you're a business owner, that's what you call them. You call them clients. It's fine. They have been the bulk of the people that I speak to. But it's been very uplifting. It's been very motivating. I kind of started Michael Laidler Unlimited on a whim, so to speak. I didn't know I was going to be creating a speaking business. I just knew that as I was developing myself in that area, it helped me solidify a passion that I didn't realize that I had. And for anybody listening, if you're thinking about your current role in law enforcement, or you're retired, or you're wondering what's going to do after your career, just start trying different things. Try to find different things that make you happy and passionate. Public speaking may not be it for you. And that's fine. You don't have to be a public speaker. You don't have to be a professional speaker. Find something and start to build it because you never know what it is. Now, if you just want to try public speaking, try it because you may really enjoy it. And are you going to be fearful? Of course. Every time I get on stage, I have some level of fear and anxiety. And that's not because I'm nervous that people aren't going to accept me or I'm going to mess up. I'm more nervous that I may not give them the best message they need today. Not saying the message isn't good, but everybody is at different walks of life. And if I'm speaking to 5 people or 5,000, I want to make sure that I'm helping each and every person that's in that room. And that's sometimes the fear I have of public speaking is I can't touch everybody. But you can't control that. You can't control what people receive. You can control what you send, but you can't control what they receive. So for me, all of that has kind of culminated to where we're at today. Me being here on Chris's new podcast, just growing and developing and kind of inspiring people to follow your passion, whatever that might be. But know that at the end of the day, if you're passionate about whatever you're doing, it will resonate with others and it'll allow you to grow and succeed and, you know, be satisfied in what you're doing in your everyday life.
Right. Well, I think that's awesome. And I think that brings us to kind of where we're at, Mike, because I got the chance to meet you so that the audience knows we met each other at FBI LEDA's annual conference in San Antonio this year, which was just a couple months ago. And I had been thinking about this for a long time, and I know that it was just that point. It was very hard to kick off. Like, you knew what you wanted to do. You kind of wanted to get there, and it's been, am I going to succeed or am I going to fail? And I think that's part of what we talk about when we get into the leadership and self-awareness part, because that's a big self-awareness thing. To be, can I make that leap? Can I make that jump? And I think after that first one, I felt that I had empowered myself to at least go, I can do that second one. And then I can maybe, set up that third one. But I think for us in law enforcement, and even in just first responders in general, that we have this thought that we have to keep everything so bottled up. And we look at that in every aspect of our life. And that's where it comes to, I know that you speak a lot about that self-awareness portion and that mental wellness.
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that it's becoming buzzwords, but thank God it finally is becoming buzzwords, because these are things that, being a career law enforcement officer and me still in it, like, it's a lot of years to you build all that stuff up in your head, and it's your work stuff on top of your family life, on top of
Correct.
everything going on, and you're just stifling all that. At sooner or later, you're just going to explode.
Yeah, and no, and contrary to what we all believe we can do, our mind is only so strong. Like literally, like there's no data or stat that you're going to be able to cite that says, "Well, my brain is stronger than this person's brain because I went through this training or that training." No, it's you will explode in this industry. You will have a hard time, and if you don't explode publicly, you're going to explode privately, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to minimize those private explosions, because what ends up happening is you have a private explosion, and then what do you start doing? You start thinking about, well, is it worth me being here? Is anybody going to miss me? Is it just easier to end this misery that I'm going through? And the answer is typically no. It's typically no each and every time, because you never know who's watching you or who's waiting to hear your story so they can overcome whatever they're going through. And if you're able to speak life into somebody, just like saying, well, you know what, I had a really bad day at work or my kid's sick, but I'm here. That might be enough motivation to keep people from doing something bad. I am very excited about the current state of law enforcement. Is there improvement needed? Of course, but the fact that we have the buzzwords of things like resiliency, de-escalation, mental wellness, mental health, PTSD. Of course, there's buzzwords, but we got to start somewhere. I can tell you, and Chris, I know you're in the same boat as me. 20 years ago, we weren't talking about stuff like this. I mean, there's an author out there, two authors actually, that I like to cite whenever I talk about self-awareness and mental wellness, and it's Dr. Kevin Gilmartin and Lieutenant Grossman. They've been talking about mindset for at least 2 decades. However,
They're awesome.
Our industry wasn't ready to hear that.
No, they were not.
And people are like, well, yeah, I was so excited to hear about this bulletproof mindset that Lieutenant Grossman was talking about. But you know what? Maybe we don't need to be a wolf or a sheepdog. You know what that means? That means understanding where you're at and creating a level of toughness, but not to the point to where it becomes a handicap. Same thing with Dr. Gilmartin. You ever read his book called Emotional Survival? He talks about some of the stressors that you and your family go through. But once again, those to me were before the time that we were ready to hear it. So now that we have these cliche phrases or buzzwords, I'd rather have too many of them, because back in the day, we didn't have enough. And going forward, the more buzzwords we can have, the more people we can say that are becoming more touchy-feely. I know nobody likes to say that, but the ones that are more touchy-feely, that's fine, because I'd rather you have a little level of softness to your demeanor and you're here another day on this planet, versus being so hard that you take your own life because you didn't think you could have a sliver of vulnerability for people to help out. And to me, I think that starts with a lot of conversations like the one we're having now, having podcasts like yours, Chris, that dives into the importance of mental wellness, self-awareness, resiliency, because people are struggling each and every day, especially in high stress industries. I can even stretch it out to say every first responder, EMS, firefighters, dispatchers, the support staff at these agencies, they're going through stress too. And they're struggling, and they need to hear messages of people being able to overcome some of this, because a lot of times what we do see in some of these suicides or these things where people attempt a suicide is they feel like they're alone. They feel like nobody can understand. They feel like they're not worthy. And even if you're listening to this podcast right now, if you are feeling that way, I'll tell you firsthand, you are worthy. If you're still here, make the most out of it. Know that people want to hear you go, but you have to understand that it's part of the building blocks of getting stronger. So, Chris, I love that you talked about that we have the buzzwords, but the buzzwords are important. I think I'd rather have them than not have them, because every day we take is a step in that direction of helping to strengthen the mindset of the people around us.
Sure, and I think that goes in hand, and I think I want to get into this a little bit more because it needs to be that some of the problems that we have in law enforcement, and you know this back then, we had that suck it up attitude, and the problem is we need that leadership to now change that narrative. Those leaders who are not new leaders have to use that and let them people know that it's okay to not be okay. I mean, everybody has that mindset. It's set into them early in their careers, and now they're late in their careers that they don't talk about that stuff. And I think that's where we're finding that issue. But we can change that narrative now as we bring new people in and putting in programs that start when you hire individuals, so they're used to it. It becomes the norm for you new people coming in. But then you also give people that opportunity to say, hey, this outlet is there for you. I don't need to know that you made that call, but if you need to know that you can make that call without there being repercussions. And I think that's some of that hard part that we find in the older generation of law enforcement officer or first responder. It's not just law enforcement officers. It's everybody. I mean, I started my career as a firefighter years ago, and I remember some of the things I tell people a lot of times, and it used to be a punchline. It's not really a punchline for me, but I look at people and go, like, I wouldn't take half of what's in my head and give it to you. That's because I wouldn't put that burden on you, because there's things that I've seen over 30 plus years of being a first responder that I had to find. I wait till late in life till I tried to find an outlet for that, because it finally was getting to a point where I'd be watching something on television, and that's what would cause me to kind of get my sympathetic system up. Like I would find myself getting, emotional over something on TV. And it was just because that stuff was built up, and I had to have that time in my life. And it was fairly recent. It was within the last 10 years that I had to go clean my closet. I had to clean my mental closet, so to speak. I had to get that stuff away from me, because it would, after a while, it just causes problems in everything in your life, because you're just hypersensitive to everything, because you've got no place to put anything else. There's no room in your closet. So I think that's one of the things that, and I come back to something I kind of ended last week with Matt, is having that courage, find someone to help you clear your closet out. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, because as first responders, as law enforcement officers, I think we are at a point sometimes where we have no trust. That trust is very limited. We give it to maybe our closest friends, but if our closest friends are them hardcore guys who don't want to hear you talk about what's hurting on you, you don't tell them. So it's finding that person. And I encourage people, it may take you time, and I get it, but find that person, whether it's a professional individual, whether it's somebody that's your closest friend that you can tell anything to. Clean that closet out, man. Get rid of those things. And if you can't do it personally and with someone please do it professionally, because there's too many first responders and we know, and military, who are just taking their lives because they have all this stuff built up inside them.
No, I completely agree with you, Chris. Full transparency. When I first started talking about self-awareness a couple of years ago, I wasn't really doing a lot of my own professional. I wasn't seeking any professional help myself. I obviously, I had family members, church members, friends that you could confide things in. But I was like, you know what? I keep talking about this, but I need to actually start doing it. So for about the last 18 months, maybe 2 years now, I see a counselor at least once a month, at least. It started off with a couple of free sessions through EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but I have pretty much a standing appointment once a month with the counselor. You know why? Because I realize how important it is to clean out the mental closet. That's why. And I can't tell people to do stuff that I don't do. So we talk about leaders, title or no title. If you're going to suggest somebody seek mental help at some point, make sure that you've done it at some point yourself, whether professionally or personally, because last thing you want to do is drive somebody to some of these great crisis support teams or peer support teams or EAP, and you don't really know what the experience is. And I can tell you, even if you just try it once, you're going to feel great, especially if you have the right counselor or therapist. I can tell you things that we talk about is very mind opening. It's very relieving for me because it allows me to be open with a person that's literally there in an unbiased manner to see me grow. They don't have any dog in the fight. They don't know any of my friends. They don't know the family. I mean, obviously, I describe things, but it's like, okay, why are you doing this? And how do we overcome this? What are solutions to getting this better? And I have found personally so much mental relief from doing that on a monthly basis that I wouldn't replace it. Like, that's why, like, it was this actually earlier this week. I don't know when the episode's going to drop, but I just went on like Monday just to have an hour conversation. I scheduled my next one for July because I understand how important it is. Like, we literally do it because I don't want to lead somebody down a path that I'm not willing to walk myself. So with the mental health, mental therapy, whatever, like you said, cleaning out the closet or cleaning out the mental closet, whatever that might be, we have to drive for it. We have to push for it because we have struggled for too long trying to hide things. And I understand why we hide things because we're taught, whether you're a male or female, just having an alpha mentality. A lot of times you're taught that showing vulnerability isn't the way to go. And what you realize is that it's complete opposite. Like, you should be showing vulnerability because one, you don't hide it from people. They see that you're human. And then two, it allows people to show theirs because people that are very good followers, they will follow you to the last day completely. Whatever your style is, if you like to go drink, they're going to go drink, even if they don't like drinking. If you like to sleep on duty, they're going to sleep, even if you don't like sleeping. If you like to be angry and curse people out just to curse them out, that's what they're going to do. So if you have that kind of influence, why don't you influence people to do the right thing for their mental well-being? But they're not going to do it if you're talking bad about it or you're saying, oh, that person's weak, or man, that person acts like a whatever you want to insert in there that makes them look bad. Whatever that might be, you as a leader, and Chris heard me talk about this during my presentation, like you have to be that source you have to be that role model to people, even if you don't want to be. Like, you're like, well, I don't want to lead. Well, if you leave your house, you're going to lead. In law enforcement, you're leading somebody. I mean, no matter what it is, at work or at home. Knowing that, and since if you didn't know that before, now you know, listen to this podcast, that somebody's watching you, somebody's paying attention, somebody's seeing how you react and move to situations. Lead them in a sense that it allows them to grow. Obviously, by doing that, you're going to also allow yourself to be open and be vulnerable. But know that if you don't want to do it for yourself, because some of us, that's how we are, we always want to be a servant leader. Think about servant leader in the same manner of helping other people get the help they need.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue because I want to get into your book. You wrote a book, Greatness Beyond the Badge, that kind of, I think, looks at some of those aspects of what we do in law enforcement. And I think you say as building a foundation and look in the mirror at yourself first and noting that you need to start from within in order to be able to do that. And I think you're kind of getting there with that last statement is going, we have to lead. But I think some of it is that we're not all perfect.
Nope.
You can't, there's no perfect person out there. If you're doing the best you can with what you have and you're continuing to grow and you learn from what you're doing, I think that is a main key. Like, we got to look at our people and go, look, I don't want you to, I know you can't be the perfect person, but we all learn from each other. We'll learn from things that happen. And that starts with that person themselves. So if you can talk a little bit about your book and kind of what got you to writing it, I think that a lot of people nowadays, with the way we get into social media and a lot of the things that we have available with the internet, that a lot of people kind of look at it and go, hey, I'd love to be able to do that or try to do that. So what kind of led up to that, and what's kind of the crux of why you wrote it?
So it's kind of a humorous story in a manner. Nothing crazy happened, but when I came back into the speaking world and I decided I was going to start talking about like mental wellness, self-awareness, I created a presentation called The Invisible Law Enforcement Officer, 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. And that's kind of what brought me back onto the scene when it came to speaking. I was still doing leadership because I've studied a lot of that, and I can definitely learn. I can definitely teach people how to engage, retain, and motivate their people. But I really want to take a different approach to my speaking content. So I kind of brought that presentation out. And then back in March of 2022, I was listening to a podcast, and it was a podcast with a company called the Self-Publishing School. And their owner, Chandler Bolt, he made a pretty bold statement on there. And he said that we can get your book published in 90 days or less. Now, mind you, when I listened to this podcast, I had no intent on writing a book. Like nothing. And I'm not saying down the line I wouldn't, but in March of 2022, Michael Laidler didn't have in his forecasted vision for 2022 he'd write a book. But the side of me that loves challenges, I couldn't resist. So I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to the company. Let me see, because why don't I want to see if they can really get my book published in 90 days or less? So I signed up for the program, and I spent the first maybe 45 days every morning waking up and working on my manuscript. I got the first round done. I got it cleaned up. I ended up getting it to an editor, proofreader. We worked on the images. We actually did everything that needed to do to publish. And by July 26, 2022, I published the book. Now, it was a little bit over 90 days, but it was on me because I had to add a chapter on goal setting. But I say it's a funny story because I didn't really intend on writing a book in 2022. And that presentation I created called The Invisible Law Enforcement Officer ended up becoming Greatness Beyond the Badge. I just took content that I was already speaking on and converted it into a manuscript in a book. Now, obviously, I had to add more stories. I had to get more data to create a book of that size. But it wasn't something that I had to like reinvent the wheel. And a lot of people, they say, well, what should I write on? I said, well, if you're already speaking on something, take that presentation and turn it into a book. Don't overthink the process. So many of us, I've heard people tell me, well, I've been working on a book for 2 years. I'm like, what are you working on? Like, is your life story changing? Like, because you're never going to find the perfect time to publish it. Even the day that I published it, I was like, man, I should include this in my book. But what it taught me was that people write more books, and then you just put the story in the next book. And I will even say one of the benefits to me personally, one of the many, of course, that the book gave me is if you read it or if you're thinking about reading it, I wasn't really looking as much of my non-law enforcement time as I should have been. And there's a story that I usually open up with whenever I speak about mental wellness, and it's what happened with my mother in depression. And the reason why that was suppressed was because, to me, that wasn't a significant part of my life because I hid it away. I literally had it compartmentalized to where I never thought about it. But me writing that book made me realize that things that I was going through during that time, as far as the book writing and being an adult, started before law enforcement. And I say that to say that we all have things going on in and outside of law enforcement, in and outside of the industry. When we're looking at mental wellness and self-awareness, we have to take everything into account, not just what we see on the surface. And to me, for the longest, I was just looking at what the industry was doing to me, not everything else. So the book actually allowed me to kind of dive more into my own history. It allowed me to start thinking about mental health. It helped me think about counseling, therapy, because before I wasn't really taking it as serious, so to speak. So the cool part about the book, obviously anybody listening, I do want you to buy it and read it, of course. But at the end of the day, I want you to be inspired just by hearing me say, when you write your own book, you're going to learn things about yourself that you never thought of. And is it possible to do a book from scratch to fully published in 6 months or less? Of course it is. I had a little bit of a head start because I already had an idea, but I had to go and do the work every single morning for those 45 days. I had to wake up and either type or speak or transcribe into Google Docs. I had to do that myself. You have to put that work in, but once you do it, you will feel a level of relief and satisfaction that I don't know how to tell you. To fellow book writers, you know what that feeling is. You know what it feels to go out there and actually publish a book and then hear someone say, man, that inspired me. The cool thing about a book is you will never know who it inspires at the end of the day. Right. Just know if it even inspires one person, then all that time you spent, like for me, those 45 days, waking up every day for an hour or two, it's all worth it, because the importance of developing yourself sometimes takes you to be a little bit vulnerable. And I put some stories in there that showed some vulnerability about myself, but it allowed me to dive deeper into my own growth as a person.
Right. I think that's kind of the hardest part. I think once you get over that hurdle, you're able to share pieces of your life that people just don't know about. Like, people know what they see that we do every day outside of our homes, or just to your point, they don't know how either one of us were brought up in life. They don't know what our family, unless we share that with them. So, like, you can't expect people to know you if you don't share those things, just like you don't know them. So the hard part for me in trying to start this podcast is knowing that, look, I'm going to have to reveal some things about myself for people to go, hey, this guy ain't up there just, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing if it sticks. So I've been, 30 plus years of doing public service, between being a firefighter and a police officer. There's a lot of parts of my life that got lost personally, and with my son and with my family, and that the whole thing, ball and chain, where you go through relationships and everything else. Like, it's something that you see every day, but that goes back to, again, I think, that self-awareness and trying to get through all of that and not living yourself through all that to be able to go, man, I'm finally free from that. I finally cleaned that out. And it makes me so much better at my job when you realize, look, you need to take responsibility for that stuff, and then you need to let it go. And the letting go is the hardest part, is to push that stuff away, remember it and use it, but learn from it and move on. Because holding on to that stuff is not something that's going to be any good for you. So it was a tough part, and being able to dive into that stuff that you just don't want to touch. You put it away, just like you said. It goes in the back, and you kind of just want to leave it behind that door and not open it. A good thing, and these conversations, and I think that even though I'm only 2 in, and I've spoke to you a little bit before, and my first one with Matt is somebody who I trust very dearly. So being able to have that's also therapeutic. Be able to have these conversations and sit here and speak with you, in this podcast, and let other people hear this. And like you said, I think that's one of the biggest things. And Matt had said that to me, is like, who cares if someone doesn't like it, but if it helps one person who hears this to go, you know what, man, I was listening to Chris and Mike talk the other day. I think I'm going to make a phone call. Well, then, you know what? I did my job. This worked out for someone, and you don't know who it affects. You don't know who sees it. So I think it's great. And I thank you again for spending time here, because I know that you're a busy guy. I mean, you got a lot going on between your speaking engagements. And I want to touch on, Mike has his own podcast. And I've had the opportunity to listen to that podcast quite a bit. 49 episodes out there now, I believe. And it's called the LEO First Podcast, the Law Enforcement Officer First Podcast. You can find it anywhere. I listen to it on Spotify, but you can get it anywhere. And Mike does kind of the same thing. So I want to touch on some of your what you do with your podcast, just so the audience knows, and they can go kind of look it up and listen to you there, because you have a lot of great content in there and a lot of great guests.
Yeah, appreciate that, Chris. Yeah, the podcast is really about people. Literally, it's about showing that we're all people in and outside of the industry. We're not solely identified by the uniform we put on. And I think for a lot of people, that's where they struggle at, because they think that their agency or their organization, their nonprofit, whatever it might be, is who they are. No. You're who you are well before you get wherever you're at. And you're going to be whoever you are well after you leave. And that's one of the main focuses of the LEO First Podcast, is to let people know that no matter where you're at in life, people have things going on. We're all human. We all are struggling through something. And then hearing how they've been able to overcome some of these things. And when I think about it, I've had many people, not just on my shows I've been on, it's like, man, it's just like Chris, you touched on, it's just like therapeutic to be able to come and share what you have going on with other people, because so many people just need to hear that voice. And everybody's voice is different. Some people like hearing mine. Some people like hearing yours. Some people like to hear Matt. Some people like to hear whoever.
Right.
You just have to have it there. And the LEO First podcast, that's what we're doing. We're bringing in, or I'm bringing in at that, I'm bringing in law enforcement officers, retired, family members, vendors, anybody who supports the law enforcement industry. That's who I want to bring on, because I know that they all have unique experiences. Although I may have worn the same uniform as another person I had on my show years ago, they all have done different things in their life. They've struggled through different things. And the more I can promote that, the more I can have people out there just speaking and allowing themselves to be heard. That's a win for me. I don't gain anything financially directly from the podcast. I don't gain any sponsorships. I don't do none of that for that. I do it just because I enjoy it. I like talking to people and hearing their stories, and I like giving them an opportunity and an outlet to share the things they have been through. Because as you said, Chris, if one person hears it and we can change one life and we can change one person from making a bad decision, then I will do 1,000 podcasts for that reason, because I truly believe we all have a voice that needs to be heard. And that's what the LEO First podcast is doing.
Awesome. Well, I know that this time goes fast, and we could talk forever. And that's one thing I'm finding very quickly on these podcasts. And I could keep going and keep going and keep going. And you're like, well, people are gonna sooner or later go, I can't hear no more of this. But the biggest thing that I want to touch on now is Michael. Please tell everybody how they can find you, what you're doing next, and kind of the things that are going on. Like where you're going to be, what you're going to do, if you got some podcasts coming up, and so on.
Oh, always. If you ever check out my YouTube page, I'm always usually posting podcasts every 2 weeks. I have lately been doing more in-person podcasts like I did with Matt that I have not published or I haven't released yet, because I try to keep it brought out. But the main thing I do for my business platform is I do a lot of speaking now. And I realize that the more people I can speak to, the better. So if people are ever looking to book me or just hear about some of the things that I'm doing or read about it, LinkedIn is my most favorite social media. I have a little bit of IG, I have a little bit of X, I have a little bit of Facebook, but LinkedIn, I don't know what it is. I mean, I do know what it is. It's a whole bunch of professionals that have the same agenda. It's where you can find me. And it's very simple. It's just my first and last name, Michael Laidler. It's no numbers, it's no letters in between. But as I've been going forward, and I know I didn't get a chance to talk to you about this before, Chris, before the show, I realized that people are struggling or curious on how to have their voice be heard more at a bigger stage. So recently I dropped an online course called the 6-Week Speaker. That's taking all the stuff I have learned and putting into an online course, because I have had several people, law enforcement, non-law enforcement, they say, well, how did you develop a speaking business? I say, well, I have this online course. You can take it. Once you take it and you believe you still want to do public speaking, then we can look at coaching. I can look at coaching you to do it, because if I just tell you something once, you're probably not going to do it. Realistically, I mean, it's life. Just like our kids, we say, hey, go clean, or go make your bed. The first time, although they heard it, they may not do it. And even if they did, they were right the first time. So that's the same thing with coaching. I can tell you everything I do, maybe in an hour, but to actually do it consistently and building at that level, you have to have coaching. So those are the kind of things that I, outside of speaking, because I do speaking at least 2 or 3 times a month, no matter what. That's what is always going to be on top of my list, because speaking in front of law enforcement and any person that wants to learn how to improve their self-awareness and mental health, that's what I'm all about. But I'm starting to do a little bit of coaching too, because I want to now help people spread their message just as much as I'm able to spread mine, because I know the benefit of a podcast. I know the benefit of online courses. I know the benefit of social media. I know all of that. But if I die tomorrow, I want other people to be able to go do the same thing on their own. I want people to be able to go and live and succeed and be able to spread their message, because once people have heard you once, especially on the stage, they're not going to always want to bring you back every year. So I understand that. So part of that and part of my ability to help minimize having random people on stage is, you know what? Let me be part of the solution and help people grow in that area. And that's, like I said, that's what I brought to with the 6-Week Speaker. with that online course. And then also with the coaching, I'm like, okay, I need to help people grow in that area, especially when I'm not traveling. Like on a day like today, like I was on a coaching call earlier. I mean, if I'm not traveling, I can easily do that virtually from home. I don't have to go to somebody's site. And it helps them get their message out a little bit quicker than they may have if they just try to Google it on their own. So, Chris, that's kind of all the stuff I have going on, especially in the professional world. Obviously, I have my son, and we're actually going to do a lot of traveling in July. We have Delaware, North Carolina, we have Miami and Chicago to all go to in July. So
awesome. So you're coming to my great state of Delaware. You're coming to Delaware.
Yeah, huh? I'll be in Newcastle.
You'll be right close to me in Delaware. So
yes,
that'll be nice.
Yes.
Well, maybe I'll get a chance to see you when you're here.
Yeah. We'll definitely connect. But that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, professionally and personally, I'm always doing something. Like you said, I do like to travel, but I do make time because podcasts like yours are extremely important to me because they have a message that can be heard, and I know you can deliver it. So just based on what I met and who I met at the FBI Leader, I'm like, you know what? Chris is a solid guy, and if he needs whatever help he needs, especially to get something like this rolling and push, I'm all about, because this is how we help each other. This is how we do that old phrase, force multiplier. This is how we do it. This is how we control that scenario, is by helping each other out and not realizing or having a scarcity mindset. We can't have that if we're going to grow.
Right. Well, it's much appreciated. Mike, thank you very much. I thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy. I appreciate having the time to speak with you and get on here and talk about the things, fairness, about leadership, about your book. I have not had a chance to read it yet. I am going to do it, though, because I kind of looked it up and I said, I'm not going to be able to get it before I talk to him, but I will get it because I enjoy reading that kind of thing. I never used to be a reader, but in the last few years, I've really started picking up a lot of books that are related to leadership and self-awareness because, of course, if I want to sit here and talk about it, I want to have information about it. So I thank you very much, my friend. I wish you safe travels everywhere you go. And hopefully soon I will see you maybe in Delaware.
Yes. Well, we'll make it work.
Thank you, my friend. You take care. Be safe.
All right.
You've been listening to the Deep Blue Project. As a father, husband, friend, and someone who loves to chat about anything and everything, Chris brings over 3 decades of public service experience to the table. With a background in firefighting and law enforcement, along with degrees in criminal justice and behavioral science, he's seen it all, and he's learned a thing or two along the way. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on LinkedIn and X at Deep Blue Project. Find our website at deepblueproject.com. And to reach out, send an email to deepblueproject@outlook.com. Keep keeping it real. And we'll see you next time on the Deep Blue Project.